इतनी कोशिश के बाद भी अतिथि नहीं गया तो नहीं गया, पर हम इंडियंस भी कहाँ मानने वाले थे, भगा के ही माने। Well, Gandhiji could gauge that the movement was turning violent at many places, and satyagrahis needed to be properly trained before they would be ready for mass struggles. So the movement was withdrawn in February 1922.
Besides, some of the leaders wanted to participate in elections to the provincial councils. Swaraj Party was formed by C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru.
In the late 1920s, Indian politics again shaped because of two factors. The first effect was the worldwide economic depression, and the second effect was the falling agricultural prices. The statutory commission was set up to look into the functioning of constitutional system in India and suggest changes.
In 1928, Simon Commission arrived in India, and it was greeted by the slogan, "Go back, Simon." In December 1929, under the presidency of Jawaharlal Nehru, the Lahore Congress formalized the demand of Purna Swaraj, or full independence for India. It was declared that 26 January 1930 would be celebrated as Independence Day. The Salt March and the Civil Disobedience Movement.
Mahatma Gandhi found in salt a powerful symbol that could unite the nation. Salt was something consumed by the rich and the poor alike, and it was one of the most essential items of food.
Tax on salt and the government monopoly over its production, Mahatma Gandhi declared, revealed the most oppressive face of British rule. So, on 31st January 1930, Gandhiji wrote a letter to Viceroy Erwin with 11 demands. This letter was, in a way, an ultimatum. His letter stated that if the demands were not fulfilled by 11 March, the Congress would launch a civil disobedience campaign. But the Erwin was unwilling to negotiate. So Mahatma Gandhi started his famous Salt March, accompanied by 78 of his trusted volunteers. The march was over 240 miles from Gandhiji's ashram in Sabarmati to the Gujarati coastal town of Dandi. On 6th April, he reached Dandi and ceremonially violated the law, manufacturing salt by boiling seawater. This marked the beginning of the civil disobedience movement. The movement spread across the world and salt law was broken in different parts of the country. Foreign cloth was boycotted, peasants refused to pay revenue, and in many places, forest law was violated. In April 1930, Abdul Ghaffar Khan, a devout disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, was arrested. Mahatma Gandhi was arrested a month later, which led to attacks to all structures that symbolized British rule. Gandhiji was seemingly alarmed by such frightful repercussions and so decided to call off the movement. He then made a pact with the Erwin on 5th March 1931, Gandhi-Erwin Pact. Gandhiji consented to participate in a round-table conference in London. But the conference broke down and disappointed Mahatma Gandhi returned to India and relaunched the civil disobedience movement. It continued for almost a year, but by 1934 it lost its momentum. How participants saw the movement. The Patidars of Gujarat and the Jats of Uttar Pradesh were active in the movement. They became enthusiastic supporters of the civil disobedience movement. But they were deeply disappointed when the movement was called off in 1931. To organize business interests, the Indian Industrial and Commercial Congress in 1920 and the Federation of the Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industries FICCI in 1927 was formed. The industrialists attacked colonial control over the Indian economy and supported the civil disobedience movement when it was first launched. Another important feature of the civil disobedience movement was the large-scale participation of women. But for a long time, Congress was reluctant to allow women to hold any position of authority within the organization. The limits of civil disobedience. Dalits, addressed as untouchables, were not moved by the concept of Swaraj. Mahatma Gandhi used to call them Harijans, or the children of God, without whom Swaraj could not be achieved. He organized satyagrah for the untouchables, but they were keen on a different political solution to the problems of the community. They demanded reserved seats in educational institutions and a separate electorate. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, who organized the Dalits into the Depressed Classes Association in 1930, clashed with Mahatma Gandhi at the Second Round Table Conference by demanding separate electorates for Dalits. The Pune Pact of September 1932 gave the depressed classes, later to be known as the scheduled castes, reserved seats in provincial and central legislative councils. After the decline of the non-cooperation Khilafat movement, Muslims felt alienated from the Congress, due to which the relations between Hindus and Muslims worsened. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was willing to give up the demand for separate electorates if Muslims were assured reserved seats in the Central Assembly and representation in proportion to population in the Muslim-dominated provinces. Nevertheless, the hope of resolving the issue at all parties conference in 1928 disappeared, when Mr. Jaikar of the Hindu Mahasabha strongly opposed efforts at compromise. The sense of collective belonging.
Nationalism spreads when people begin to believe that they are all part of the same nation.
Finally, in the 20th century, the identity of India came to be visually associated with the image of Bharat Mata. Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay created the image, and in the 1870s he wrote Vande Mataram as a hymn to the motherland. Rabindranath Tagore painted his famous image of Bharat Mata portrayed as an aesthetic figure. She is calm, composed, divine and spiritual. In late 19th century India, nationalists began recording folk tales sung by bards, and they toured villages to gather folk songs and legends. During the Swadeshi movement in Bengal, a tricolor flag, red, green and yellow, was designed, which had 8 lotuses representing 8 provinces of British India and a crescent moon representing Hindus and Muslims. By 1921, Gandhiji designed the Swaraj Flag, a tricolor, red, green and white, and had a spinning wheel in the center, representing the Gandhian ideal of self-help.
In the first half of the 20th century, what was emerging was a nation with many voices, wanting freedom from colonial Atithi, whose days were now numbered. This brings us to the end of our chapter. Bye-bye.